anthologies. This will be serious literature and Canadian. You'll have to look out for the author's intentions and also his tricks, his puns, his jokes, the things he is doing to make it difficult and hence worthwhile, right? Pay attention. You might be asked, what is the most vivid figure of speech in this selection? Just remember this. The ivory wings of the white bird fell off and woke the sleeping maiden who gently lifted her feet from the oven piping hot. Now you may ask yourself, what does that symbolize? And as a matter of fact, why does the author say what at the end of the line? Oh, I forgot. George Bowering was born in Princeton, British Columbia, December 1st, 1938, the son of a high school Latin teacher. In the morning, usually, sometimes the early morning, sometimes the late morning, I get up and have several cups of coffee and read the newspaper or the Vancouver Province and read the mail if there is any. Then if that's a writing day, what I used to do was warm up writing letters. I used to write 4 letters and say, there, I got the letters written, now I can do that. Now I do it the other way around. I write the letters if and when I can get around to them. The difference between art and lies is that if you're a poet, it's called art, and if you're not a poet, it's called lies. When I lived in Greenwood, I was learning to be a liar, but I wasn't learning yet to be a writer. But when I lived in Oliver, I wanted to be a policeman at first, and then I wanted to be a crime fighter, because, I was reading comic books in those days. And eventually, the newspaper reporters looked as heroic as cops used to look in the comics. So I guess I must have been seeing a few movies or something like that. So I wanted to be a baseball writer. So when I got to college, I told people I wanted to be a reporter, and then eventually I told people I wanted to be a writer, and then I started doing it. I conceived my love for nature when I burned the hillside, and this I did before I began school. The name of the town was Greenwood, and when I returned a few years later, the hill was green. I feared a spanking when I came home, but received none, and then I conceived my love for my parents. The hillside burned. It burned faster than I could walk to step on the fire. Every step was on the blackened earth I was learning to love. I conceived my love for nature when I saw it burning faster than the men could get shovels into the earth. The name of the town was Greenwood, and the war was on, where cities burned in their cement. What held the hill together beneath the flames, I did not know, but I learned love for it and saw those men join to the hill in my shame, that I could cause such peril while there was a war on. I ran home and waited for the punishing hand while God allowed fire in the cities across the sea. It never came, and when I went back a few years later, the hill was covered with green wood, while the nearby hills were brown, and the war was over, and I loved it. I can't remember how I started writing my first poem, but I do remember that my first long poem, that's basically what I write now, my first long poem was a thing I did in, I think, grade 10. It was 40 pages long, and it was about headhunters in Malacca. So to give the sense that was before I learned about the sense of place in your verse. And I have no idea whether there are headhunters in Malacca, but I knew that poetry had to be about exciting stuff. I mean, that's in Keats and those people, it was always exotic. And exotic and poetry, somehow or another, seemed related to one another. Lost that. I wish I still had a copy of it. There's an essay by Charles Olson that talks about the wonderfulness of getting directly from your body onto the page quickly by the swift use of the typewriter. And I used to use the typewriter to compose everything, poetry, plays, fiction, essays, the whole works. Actually, the time when I went back to the pen was about the same time that I got my first electric typewriter. And I guess what I was feeling was that I needed some kind of slowing down and resistance and contemplation and reflection and so forth while I was writing. That's say before that I was writing straight ahead, and that was happening when I was thinking more about somehow saving images of the world, getting down what happened. Now I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in writing. So any relationship between the world and what I'm writing is only incidental. Pen has you really do. It's a lot slower writing, and you see the words coming out, right? You say, oh, look at that word. I think I'll write something that goes with that, and so forth, and away you go. Long shadows fall across the infield in the ninth inning. Sometimes ball players look like they're dying as they walk off the field in the dusk. I knew an old man in San Francisco came to life when the Dodgers were in town. Now he is dead too, and Jack is dead. It's just a game, I used to be told. It isn't whether you win or lose, but how you play the game. September 30, 1965, Willie Mays has 51 home runs, gray hair at his temples. He says he has been getting tired for 6 years. I know I feel my own body wearing down, but next spring, the swing of a 35-ounce bat is going to flash with sunlight, and I will be a year older. My nose was broken twice by baseballs. My body depends on the game. My eyes see it now on television. No chicken wire. It is the aging process. The season can't help but measure. I want to say only that it is not a diversion of the intelligence. A man breathes differently after rounding the bag. History, is there such a thing, does not choose. It waits and watches. The game isn't over till the last man's out. I think one time I said that what I wanted to do when I was writing was to make sure I didn't shame the language. It sounds kind of hoity-toity, but people like it, and I like it. That the language doesn't come out worse than it went in. Is basically what I'm interested in. I think, I suppose, in a sense, a writer is in some ways kind of a break or some kind of insurance against the use of language that by advertisers and politicians and people who want to use language as a tool, as something to get their own ends. So I suppose if there is one poem for every advertising campaign, that somehow or another we're keeping some kind of balance going. I never have to worry about what am I going to do today. I always have 2 or 3 things that have been going for a long time. Like for instance, this year, I would have one book going in the computer and another book going in the typewriter. And I would work on the typewriter book in the morning and work in the computer book in the afternoon, because if you worked on the computer book in the morning, you'd never split for lunch. With the typewriter, you always want to get away from it. You always want to find some excuse to get up and go somewhere else, right? And I have a telephone in my typewriter room. I don't have a telephone in the computer room. And when the phone rings, I get really mad because I have to get up and go away from the computer. My poetry rhymes now. It's just that it doesn't rhyme at the ends of lines all the time. Usually Angela used to help me. She used to do the rhyming for me. I'd just write a bunch of words and she would put in the rhymes. But now she doesn't do that anymore. She's busy. She's a teacher, so my poems don't rhyme at the ends of lines anymore. The word from my hand follows the release of my eye from the dream of my release from the ground, but just. I was 2, and I was 3, and I was nearly 4. I was one with the ground. I was too good to be true. I was free of the earth. I was 4, correcting all the evils of the world, and I would never die. I would never begin dying. I flew standing up, maybe 6 inches from the sidewalk. I could never get higher, but I could fly. I flew in the attitude of Jesus standing on the water, or above all on the Mount of Olives. Jesus, I thought I was. I began to think I was a Superman or Jesus because I could not be ordinary, or what was the use of being here inside my mind instead of out there where they all were. In my dreams, I never met anyone flying toward me. I never grew all the way up, for later, I thought I was a poet. I had to be a poet, or what was the use of learning words and being inside my skull rather than out there where they all are. 2527 West 37th Avenue. This is where the whole poetry scene in Vancouver started in the late 50s and early 60s. It's where Warren Tallman lived, and you first met people like Allen Ginsberg and Charles Olson and Robert Creeley and Robert Duncan and all the young poets that I grew up with and still edit things with, like Frank Davey and Gladys Hindmarch, Fred Waugh, all those folks. A lot of things happen in that room up there. That room down there in the lower right's where Tisch magazine actually started and got its name a few years ago. Somebody had noticed that I don't mention colors in my poems. Partly, I suppose, because I think that's descriptive, and description's an act that I'm not very fond of. So I decided to write a poem that had to do with colors. I always set up some kind of baffle, and then I pay so much attention to that whatever the poem is really about can come up. So I knew I was going to write about colors in that poem, and then the story of my father came up. My eyes are brown. Walking inside them would be moving over burned grass on low hills. They found a desert and made it bloom. I move closer, zooming into his eyes, and find the first aperture completely filled with one petal of a blue flower, a close-up of a star weeping in surrender to the earth, a tear, aurora, weeping helplessly on the edge of the blue Nile. Men who love wisdom should acquaint themselves with a great many particulars. Cutting the crisp apple with a French knife, I saw that the worm had lived in the core and chewed his way out, something I've seen 1,000 times and never understood. And while I'm looking, he's on the other side of the green tree picking. 1, 2, 1, 2. The wisdom of the tree filling his picking bag, its weight strapped over his shoulders. He showed me, and I still do it wrong, reaching up, picking with sore arms. Strain rather than wisdom filling me, not the bag. He said, the safest step on the ladder is the top. He was trying to get me up, and always right. This one I have learned. And Saturday, I was on the top step picking apples, wanting someone to advise. That is how one becomes acquainted, working to gather.
What advice would you give to aspiring poets?
Well, I would take the two pieces of advice that I was given when I was younger and reverse them. I was told, find your own voice and write about what you know. I would say, do whatever you can to get away from your own voice and to listen to the voice that the poem has itself, so it won't be you making up a poem about your kvetches and expressing yourself and so forth. And two, try to write about something you don't know. Try to discover something that you learned through the writing of the poem. If you start writing about what you know, basically you're going to write the same thing that somebody else wrote because they wrote about what they know, and what you know and what they know is the same thing.